Hey, Big Tony Alvarez. Welcome, dude.
Thanks for having me.
Stoked to have you here.
Yeah,
super cool. You know, it's really funny, Tony. I have known of you for a very long time. I've seen you around. We'll talk all about it. I never knew your full name. Like, I never knew your last name. For 30 years, it was Big Tony. And it wasn't until I was like, oh, he actually has a last name. What do you know?
I do, actually, yeah. It's funny, my daughter, even when she was little, would introduce me at like, Dad comes to school day or whatever it was, it's my daddy, Big Tony, and it just kind of worked that way.
That's so funny. Yeah, that's rad. But truly, I was like, oh, it's kind of like, The Rock or Madonna or Bono, like just known by one name. But if you say in this area and a lot of area in the surf world and everything, you say Big Tony, everybody knows who you are. Yeah. And so if you're not watching, or if you don't know Big Tony by the name Big Tony, if you were in the surf sphere in the 90s and the first 2 decades of the 20s, if you were at surf contests, surf parties, trade shows, whatever, you would see Tony in the middle of the mix of all of it. And that's where I knew you from. And if you don't see Tony, there's a reason his name is Big Tony. Super recognizable, big guy, intimidating, even though he has a big smile. But if you don't know you, I like to know that you're on my side of the track, but tatted and just a very recognizable presence wherever you go. And that's how I think most of us in this world knew of you. What's been super fun, Tony, is going through this process. I've learned so much about you that I had no idea. And I think that is kind of the magic of these podcasts, is we get to share stories of, I bet there's a ton of people that know you from what I just described that wouldn't know of all the things you've done in the surf industry, all the roles, not security roles, like real friggin' roles that you went and got your master's in the middle of it. I had no idea. And I love that. That's what these are all about. It's kind of learning these, all the other things. We were even talking, I think a couple of days ago, and I said, the fun part about this is we kind of know people from a certain point in time, but you don't know anything before it. And with you, I knew you from a point in time, but I didn't know all the other stuff going on around it. So I'm just stoked to kind of uncover all this stuff, because your roles at the peak of the powers of the surf industry, you were in the middle of it. You were at the biggest brands, Billabong, Hurley, Volcom, like 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
In all these different roles and all these other things that have come from it. And this whole other world of safety, security, instruction, which you still do, but you've been doing all along. So there's just a ton that we're going to unpack. But this is truly why I do this, because I get to learn all this rad stuff. And I guarantee there's a lot of people out there that know you or know of you and had no idea of all this stuff. So that's what we're going to do.
Well, that sounds good. Again, I'm humbled to be here, and thanks for having me. And I just got to make one thing very clear, that I am nothing like The Rock or Madonna or anything else, because if I was, I'd have their money too, and that would be a really nice thing. And we'd maybe have multiple podcasts going all over the world, but jokingly. But thanks for that. I appreciate that. And I just it's been a fun. It's been a fun run.
Well, let's get into it, because when we were walking in, you mentioned something. I'm like, stop. So let's go in the Wayback Machine real quick. So first, before we go there, when did the name Big Tony come out? Do you have any idea?
Couldn't even tell you. I
Really?
Honestly don't remember.
Has it been forever?
It's been for a long, long time, yeah. Growing up, you got different nicknames, and, it can be a multitude of things. Ultimately, I just, somewhere along the lines, it stuck. Somewhere between probably ages 10 to 20, it came about, and it's just kind of been that way ever since.
Yeah.
So,
well, how old are you, Tony?
I'm 58. I just turned 58 in February.
So you're 2 years older than me. So when you were this presence, I was probably not even in college. I was probably in college. Let's stop there, because we're going to talk about when you got into the surf world and how this all started. But let's go back a little further. So you'd mentioned something to me offline, but where did you grow up? And we're going to start there. Where did you grow up? And let's go.
I was born in Long Beach.
Okay.
And I, that's kind of how we were talking about before. The other guys, that's how we've been friends for 45 years. We figured out the other day.
So those other guys are the Late Night with Chalky Boys. So
right.
Lyndon and Jay, who you've been recently on theirs as well.
I didn't know we could say that on here.
Oh, of course. Those are good friends.
Yeah, Lyndon and I go back 45 years. Wow. Junior high school for sure. And it's funny, because we were at Brad Gerlach's 60th birthday this last weekend, and one of my other longest high school friends and growing up that I still talk to, John Watkins, he was there, and we were kind of reminiscing about that too. So it's pretty cool. But I was born in Long Beach. Grew up in Long Beach with my my mother and my grandmother until I was about 12, and then I was with my grandmother from there on out. My dad was all over the world. He was essentially Vietnam vet, and did a lot of stuff over on that side of the world. He eventually became a contractor. I didn't know this until later, as we call it, contractor now. But he was doing security around the globe for a lot of the big oil companies like Fluor and Bechtel, things like that. And then eventually he ended up in Hawaii. And when he did, then I was able to start kind of transferring back and forth to go see him there. That's where my connection to Hawaii first started, and then it kind of manifested from there. Into a lot of people that you and probably a lot of people listening to this will know about too. But so that's kind of where that started, and I just kind of went back and forth there. And
what was life like? Because you said you grew up with mom and grandma, and you mentioned something outside, like high on the hog, low on the hog financially. What was life like?
We were definitely low on the hog. I grew up on welfare and food stamps. There was no question about it. My first actual board that I got when I finally was able to get something that I could actually, hey, I'm going to go ride waves on. We were like throwing away the McDonald's trays at that point, right? To body surf with, was one of those small little fiberglass and styrofoam covered boards you would get at Thrifties. Really? And back in those days, kids, you don't know about this, but layaway was a thing. And I remember my mom put it on
layaway is back again, which is
it?
Yeah,
there you go.
It's
we
crazy.
call it financing now.
Right.
But back in the day, it was layaway. And I remember that board today would probably cost about $15. But back then in the 70s, that was a lot of money. So she put it on layaway for me for 3 weeks or so, give or take. And eventually that was my first board. And of course, that thing, I thought I was the kid. I got a Sharpie or some sort of marker, and I was drawing lightning bolts on it and all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, I broke that thing at 62nd place in Long Beach, of all places.
62nd
place.
Do people surf Long Beach?
There's waves in Long Beach. I'm not going to tell you where the rest of them are, but there are waves, and that's probably the most well-known spots. But anyway, that's where it all kind of started, and I was probably about 8 when that happened.
Oh, so you got in the water that early?
I got in the water early because we lived pretty close. We were down in the Belmont Heights area, and we were in the same house that my mom grew up in with my grandmother and her father. Wow. And then, but my grandfather, her dad passed away when I was 2. And my grandmother made a $50,000 life insurance policy last until I went to college, which is pretty amazing if you think about it. And then, on the other side of it, my mom's side, we were on welfare and food stamps for sure. Wow. So, it's kind of how it all started. But you know what?
Did you know, did you recognize the financial position you guys were in?
It's interesting that the first time I ever recognized it, I could actually remember like it was yesterday. Actually, I we were standing in line at a grocery store back then, which was called Alpha Beta.
Yeah,
remember those?
Yeah.
And we were in a line at Alpha Beta, and I had tough skins on that had iron-on knee pads. Remember those?
Yep.
And no shirt. And I remember we were standing in line, and I was barefoot. Because this is how I rolled, I was just rolling around barefoot, no shirt on, and that's just cruising. And I remember we were standing in line, and my mom pulled out the. I remember they were purple. I don't remember what the dollar amount was, but they were food stamps, and she was paying for the groceries with her food stamps. And I remember this lady that was standing behind us was like super irritated in the fact that we were standing in line paying with food stamps, and she just didn't dig it. And I remember that it was yesterday. Mm-hmm. So that's probably when I realized like, oh wow, we are poor, huh? And then the other time was when the first time I had to go down to the Social Security office with my grandmother and pick up our brown box of powdered milk and eggs and cheese. And I remember I wouldn't eat the cheese, and I wouldn't eat the cheese because that's what poor people ate. We weren't poor until I realized we were poor. Wow. So with that said, I mean you think about then and you think about now, or where we've come to and where we are now in our lives, especially. Somebody like myself or anybody else that's ever been through that, and you realize like, wow, that was a good thing for me because that helped make me what I have become as a person, not a man, but a person now. And I think that was a instrumental part of it. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they did a good job of living well in spite of the fact, like you didn't know that you were poor.
even though you were on food stamps, right?
Yeah.
Is that what I heard?
Yeah. And we also too, like my uncle was a big fisherman and I fished a lot. I was a fisherman a lot. I'd ride my bike down and fish off the beach or at the pier and wherever we could, and we'd bring fish back and eat and do our thing. And so you made it work,
Yeah.
You just, it was just, it was a different time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you found surfing early. What else were you into? Were you into any
skating? I skated a lot when I was a kid. I skated a lot until I was till junior high school, probably right before I decided like, oh, I'm gonna play football, that kind of thing. But I skated a lot. Lyndon and I were talking a lot about Lakewood Skate Park back in the day, and a bunch of the guys that we grew up with skating. Street skating was invented during that time frame. It's when the Dogtown guys were all kind of doing their thing, and then the Powell guys came out, the Bones Brigade came out, and then you had the Alva team and all these guys. Like they were such huge influences on us, and we were in a zone where you could, back then there were still a lot of neighborhoods that had alleys that had a lot of embankments, especially in that area in the heights, and there were slopes so you could get some speed. We weren't far from Signal Hill, Shell Hill, where they did the downhill races. So we'd all ride our bikes up to Signal Hill and go watch the downhill races. And then we're 2 blocks from the beach. Even though now that those houses at 2 blocks, I just drove through there actually earlier this week.
A little different?
Yeah, I had to go up to LA. I had to go up to, actually had to go to PV on Sunday. And I was coming back and I'm like, I don't want to sit in traffic or on the freeway. So I came down Ocean Boulevard and I drove through my old neighborhood. And I remember like, wow, remember this house? And then that house is worth like $25 million now. So it's kind of a funny thing. But yeah, so anyway.
Wow.
Yeah, so we skated, we skated, we surfed. Long Beach had a huge surfing community back then. There was a lot of influence for me growing up because a lot of the community that I was kind of embroiled in was the Polynesian community because of the athletic side. So I was we call it Hanai in Hawaii, we call it Hanai, and that means you're adopted.
Yep.
And I was kind of taken in by a family, a Samoan family that kind of set the way for me to how I was going to view my life, my lifestyle going forward. They were a big influence on me, and then when my connections in Hawaii came together, then it just kind of manifested that big time. And
So you mentioned football, and then you mentioned this Polynesian or this what nationality were they? They were
Samoan.
They were Samoan.
Yeah.
And the Hanai, we use that.
Hanai,
That's a great like the adopted, non-legal, but that's family.
Yeah,
like that's what you consider. Was it football that brought you together with that family? Is that what you were saying?
Prior to that, I think it was just kind of the known fact of who we were. And I found out many years later that my uncle and the younger brother, the youngest of the brothers, Eric, his brother Terry, was actually one of my uncle's best friends, and I had no idea about it. And I ended up meeting Eric many years later when I was in junior high school, and then it came full circle. It was crazy. I had no idea that who my uncle was always talking about, who passed away last year, was talking about Terry Totolo. And I had no idea that was Uncle Terry was actually one of my uncle's best friends back in the day. And then Eric Totolo, who was a big mentor for me growing up as an athlete, was we finally got to link up together when I was in junior high and high school. So it was cool.
Is that family still? Are you still close with them?
I haven't talked to him in a long time. I ran into Eric several years ago. But it was great to see him, and he's a big guy like me, and it was cool. And he had been keeping up a little bit on me, which was kind of cool. I'd heard some things. I was back in Hawaii. I was doing stuff around the world, that kind of thing. And but that was it. I haven't talked to him since.
Got it.
When I got out of school, I went to college, and then after that, I just took a hard left. I split. I just kind of like everybody's going this way, I'm going that way.
Well, we're going to get there in a minute. So you mentioned Hawaii early on. Now you've mentioned friends that were Samoan and the tattoos, everything, it's come together. When did that really start? You said your dad moved over there. When did you start spending time in Hawaii?
I think the first time I went over to Hawaii was probably 12. Yeah.
What island?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And at that point, I would sporadically go back and forth. So, people ask me like, where'd you grow up? And I'll say, Long Beach and Hawaii, because I learned so much about myself as a person, from being there. And these are days too when we were latchkey kids. We could go and roam the street. We could go to the beach by ourselves, and you come home when the lights are on. That kind of thing. And so you were immersed around a different genre of people than our kids are immersed in now.
You know, like then you were hanging out with grown men and you were a kid and it was no big deal. Now it's like you don't want your kids hanging out with grown men because you don't know what those guys are going to do, you know, that kind of thing. It's just a different time. So we were, you know, times where you're sitting right in the mix of all of it going down.
Where were you on Oahu?
So in town. Yeah, I was in town as a kid.
So were you in the water a bunch?
So in the water a bunch. You know, I surfed Kaisers a bunch. We surfed rock piles and, you know, bowls and all the, you know, the gnarly guys were over bowls, you know.
But what a great experience. Like that is that whole zone of in Waikiki, there's so many waves. And if you're there, like you can't go wrong.
Yeah. And it's funny because like Lennon and I, we shared an apartment together in like, I think it was like 89, something like that, 89-ish in town. And we spent a summer together in Hawaii, like got an apartment. And they had an apartment and Rick Wilt had an apartment. I came in and just kind of like bombed them and stayed there for like a month and whatever. And then I ended up coming back here, and then I ended up going back and staying for quite a while.
So okay, awesome. We'll get there. You mentioned college. When you were in high school, did you know, like, was college something that you were aiming for, that your family was? Like, how did college come about?
Interesting on the college side is I wasn't even going to go to college. Honestly, I was going to go in the military. I was going to follow my dad's footsteps, and I was going to go be a Marine. You know, that was it. And I remember the Marine recruiter was on me hard when I was a senior, and I'd already started playing football. And at that point, junior year I started getting recruited, and by the senior year I was like, oh, I can actually go to college for free. You know, which was a big deal. I was the first person in my family to go to college. You know, so that was a pretty big deal.
So where'd you go?
Yeah, I ended up, you know, got recruited by a lot of different schools. I came back and went to Cal State Fullerton. Yeah, I was going out to Purdue and going to do Purdue, and I was out in Indiana checking that all out, and I was just kind of like, this isn't my jam.
There's no surf in Indiana.
Yeah, I was too far. And then I came back, and then UNLV still wanted me after I kind of told everybody I was probably going to go to Purdue, and then after that, I was like, well, UNLV's still like 6 hours away from the ocean. And ultimately, I was like, the ocean, Fullerton's 45 minutes from the ocean, so I need to be by the beach because I'm a kid born and raised at the beach, you know. So I gotta be there. So that's what I did. Yeah, I went to Cal State Fullerton. I was a criminal justice major, and with an emphasis on I wanted to be in corrections. I wanted to be a warden.
So you've had that vision all along, like, this comes back to what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Like why was it? Because you think the influence of your dad being in the military and all that, or something totally different?
You know what? Something totally different. My dad had nothing to do with it really at the time, and I didn't even realize until like many years later that my dad had such an influence on me from that perspective. But no, growing up, a lot of the guys that I was friends with, they either wanted to be, you know, Long Beach cops, you know, and because Long Beach PD was a big thing back then, or they wanted to be, you know, officers somewhere else, and they wanted to go in there like regular law enforcement. And I don't know, I just kind of had a different vibe on it. I wanted to kind of work more in the more a different side of it, you know, different aspect of it. So I wanted to work more on the institution side of it, and you know, whether it was the jail side or the prison side. So yeah. And
so all through high school, all through college, you were playing sports, and then you go to school and you're playing ball and you're going down this path.
Yep.
You're still surfing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Got it.
Yeah, and surfing, kneeboarding. I'm a kneeboarder, and it's funny. We were joking about this in a conversation the other day. Is like, you know, some kid had walked up to me a while back, and I was standing at the shower on the north side, and he's like, "What is that?" You know, and I'm like, "What do you mean? What is that?" He goes, "What kind of board is that?" I go, "Is your dad surfing?" He goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Ask your dad; he'll tell you." And I just kind of had to walk away like that. But that shows you what the history with a lot of these kids are today. Yeah. So, but yeah, I've been a kneeboarder since the very beginning. I've started out riding boogie boards, and then we call them boogie boards, and now they're body boards. Yep. But boogie boards then, and of course riding food trays for body surf on when we were kids, if we could even get one of those, or a piece of plywood, pipos and whatnot. And then I got my first real kneeboard. I got it at a garage sale, and it was an old ET twin fin. And I wish I still had that thing because sure it's worth something to somebody.
For sure.
And then from there, it just kind of went until I finally eventually, got a board that was actually properly made for me because they were always,
too small. I would imagine, right?
Yeah. So, but so I've been
and a bit of a rare breed. I mean, we can name a handful of knee boarders in Orange County, and it's the same guys that have probably been doing it as long.
Most of them are still doing it.
Yeah.
We're
the Bill Sharps and the Tim Burnhams.
100%. It's funny. I was looking at a picture of Bill Sharp and I last night. I married him and his
Did you
wife.
really?
Yeah. I was their minister.
That's so cool.
Up down at the Elks, but yeah, the infestation is still there. We're still around for sure.
That's so good. It's so good. And part of the reason I was asking, not just pure surf, but like you ended up in the heart of the surf industry, the biggest brands, and yet through college, like I started working in surf shops when I was 13. You didn't start working in it until after college?
No, actually, I think we were trying to figure this out last week too. I can't remember exactly when. Might have been in college. But a guy named Neil Lyon, actually gave me my first introduction to the surf industry. And he had a shop called Eldorado Surf and Sport. It was up and I think it was in Lakewood, I think it was what it was. And there was a few of us that were like the Long Beach guys that would go up there and hang out at that shop. And then eventually I started working at that shop a little bit. And it was cool. I think that was the first experience he's the one that took us to our first ASR shows in Long Beach back in the day. And so I'm pretty sure we were either in high school or right at the very beginning of college. So we're still pretty young. Yeah. I met Dale Smith. I met a lot of different guys that were part of that. That's back where all the OG guys most of them are all either now retired or a lot of them are dead.
Well, you're talking late 80s.
Yeah,
at
for
that
sure.
point, right?
But because Long Beach was such a big skate hub. They had the trade show in Long Beach at the arena. That's where it used to be. So we were taken in and started. I got my first real taste of it then, and I knew that I wanted to be a part of that.
Got it.
But I didn't know how, because obviously I wasn't going to be a professional surfer. That was not even on the cards, right? So how was I going to have a chance? And many years later, I got my chance, which was kind of cool. So
super cool. Well, I can't wait to get there. But okay, so let's go back in college. You're going down this path of. Well, again, a path then not dissimilar from where you are today. What was the allure at that time? Again, it wasn't your dad, of getting into this world of security, and I don't remember the exact name of the major you were doing. What was that? That was
a criminal justice major, but I had an emphasis on corrections. So, but I later on I realized that that's not what I wanted to do. After touring some prisons and going through that and talking to some folks that were deeply involved in that lifestyle and that
seems like an incredibly challenging career. My God.
Yeah, very challenging career, very tough on the families, very tough on the individuals. Yeah. So at that point, I decided that's not what the path I'm going to go down, and I ended up I got out of school. I ended up going back to Hawaii of all places, and then kind of bounced back and forth and went from there. But
so for that period of time, you graduate, you figure out you don't want to do it. I was the same. I graduated, worked for a while in my field, and figured out that's not what I wanted to do. I had to pivot and figure out what now? You were smart. You went to Hawaii. When you were in Hawaii, were you just surfing, or were you working over there, or were you just trying to just having fun?
A little bit of everything, really. Just wherever you could get work and do work and whatever, and doing a lot of things we probably shouldn't have been doing. For sure.
Good thing there were no cameras or anything back then, right?
No cameras back then, no cell phones, none of that stuff. Cell phones that we could afford anyway.
Right.
But no, it was, just you were either digging ditches or you were bouncing somewhere or you were, I'm just going to call it pulling security for somebody, somewhere and doing that kind of thing. And I mean, you're just basically being their body man and that kind of thing. But
okay, so did that already start? Did you already start? When did that? You were trained in it or educated in it, figured out you didn't want to go into the actual world of corrections, but you started doing it on the side. Not on the side, but you started doing, sounds like security, private security. It was already starting
back
then?
School. Yeah, I started in high school.
Oh, you started in high school?
I started in high school, yeah. So it's funny, we used to get asked to run the doors at all the high school parties.
You and the Samoans?
Me and whoever, my buddy Larry and I did it. And we would go and run
Big
the doors.
Tony, from the get-go,
yeah,
right?
and we and Larry Carlton, he was a big bodybuilder guy, and he was a couple years older than me. We'd bounce the door, and we realized hey, there's a lot of money in this in high school, right? And we used to be able to go like, all right, well, half of it goes to them and half of it going to us, and we'd walk away on a weekend with some money, and it was kind of a cool thing. And we kind of started our own little business. We called it Option One, Option One Security, and it's I found a little business card we made in high school back in the day, but also too, a guy that we knew in the neighborhood had gone off, and he was much older, but he was working for a security company that was up in LA. They were all running stage crews for the punk shows. So the Whiskey and Perkins Palace and, all these different types of shows that were going on, and they always needed big guys to work in the pit. And I immediately got grabbed, and he's like, you got to come work with us. And I go, I'm not 18 yet. And they're like, it's okay. Nobody's going to check. And we'd go.
Wow.
They'd throw a uniform on me. I'd be standing in the pit, working in these shows. And next thing I know, I'm getting asked to go work with, hey, can you escort so-and-so to go do this or do that? And some pretty well-known, folks. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And didn't know what I was doing at the time. But I was like, yeah, no problem. They just wanted somebody that could be near them to keep people off them if they needed it. And that's kind of how it started.
Got it. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So when you were doing it initially, you weren't trained.
Other than the martial arts side that I had already had, yeah, that would be it.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that.
No, I'm not going to talk about it.
When did that start?
When I was pretty young, yeah. I started. I originally started when I was 8, but officially started paying for lessons when I was 12. I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't afford lessons for. We couldn't afford lessons for me when I was young. So a kid in the neighborhood was actually taking lessons at a location, and he knew that, and he was kind of like a big brother to me at the time. And he was coming home, and he would teach me what he learned at class, which is pretty cool. A couple of years after that, he beat the crap out of me anyway, but that was okay. We were kids. But that's where it really started. And eventually I went and competed and did a lot of things all the way through high school and into right to the very beginning of college. And then had a couple opportunities. I could have kept going and probably, gone to the Olympics at some point maybe on the U.S. Taekwondo team, or I could focus on getting a free education and go to school, and I kind of had to weigh the two out. And I remember my grandmother looked right at me and she goes, "You're going to school because I can't afford to send you anywhere else." And I remember that at that point then, I went to school. So
Got it.
It worked out that way. But that year, that crew that I was a part of as far as that time frame, Jimmy Kim was the gold medal winner for in the '84 Olympics.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
'88 Olympics. Sorry.
But we're starting to see how this all comes together. You were starting to do security early just because you were a big guy and capable, absolutely. And you'd been rolling for a long time already. Yep. Then you're getting to an elite level in martial arts, and you're going through college playing ball, and you're getting a criminology degree or whatever. So it sounds like there's a lot kind of coming together. Yeah. And you're in Hawaii, which is you got to be pretty tough, especially back then, to go surf certain spots in Hawaii back in the day.
Well, being a bigger guy didn't hurt,
Right.
But also too, I think because of the way I grew up, you either had respect, you didn't, and that's why I say too, in Hawaii, I learned a lot. That's why I say, I partly grew up there because I learned how to be a respectful, humble person. Because if not, even the uncles would slap you. There's no question about it. And the aunties would grab you by your ear and drag you across the front yard, no problem, right? And you just learned a different way. So that's that was a big part of who I am today.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
It's super interesting. Okay, so you're after college, you're doing security, you're in Hawaii back and forth. Where does that go? What happens next?
After college, I was bounced back and forth. I was, just working at a bar. When I came back here, I was working at a bar in Long Beach. I was working at the old Panama Joe's, the original one. And I was just bouncing at night, and I ended up learning how to sand boards. And I was sanding and polishing boards. And then I was surfing most of the day and, just kind of doing my thing. And then... out of the blue, I right before Desert Storm, the first Iraq War that we were involved in.
So early 90s, 90, 91? Is that?
93.
Oh, 93.
Yeah, and I had befriended a couple of guys that were getting deployed, and they came in one night and they were like, hey, we're leaving tomorrow, it's our last night here. And they gave me a lighter that was off of their ship, and they were like, hey, if we don't make it back, remember us, you know, and they were young. I mean, they were younger than me at the time. And, you know, I never saw them after that. I never saw them for probably about a year, 2 years later. They came back in and they were out. And at that point, they were getting involved in doing security work up in LA. And they asked me if I wanted to join and be a part of it. I'm like, yeah, what else? I don't got nothing else to do going on, you know. And at that point, I got on with them and started going up to LA and started working that LA scene, which I'm not a huge fan of at all. And
like concerts, bars, restaurants?
Bars, not so much that, but like working for, doing bodyguard work.
Oh, private.
Yeah,
private
I
security.
hate saying it that way. That's why I kind of stuttered right there. But
What do you call it?
Bodyguard work.
Bodyguard.
Yeah,
Okay.
we would have been doing bodyguard work. Later on, it became, you know, private protection. Or
Why do you not like that term?
It's just the meathead thing.
Is it?
I just hate
Okay.
it. Yeah,
Got
I'm not a meathead, even though when I was younger I probably was. But I just don't like it.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's just not my jam. So,
Fair.
but yeah, I got into that and getting my first taste into doing which we now call private protection or EP work, right? Executive protection work, and kind of did that for some very well-to-do trust funders that were, you know, it was the late 80s, early 90s, and guys were partying and doing their thing up there. There were some pretty well-known venues up there that, you know, everybody had to be at, and they wanted to show like how much security they had and how many girls they had and all this stuff. And it just, you know, we were just kind of a part of that. And then eventually I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, I'm tired of going and getting this dude's McDonald's at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's not my jam. I don't do that. So I ended up, you know, just pulling out of that. I was still bouncing, you know, and still polishing and sanding boards and yeah, doing that. And, you know, from that point on, I got a phone call like a week later, and some guys that I had met that I had worked with up in LA that were associated with them, they're former mill guys as well. They said, hey, you know, we heard you left so-and-so. And I'm like, yeah. I go, yeah, I was going to punch that dude in the face if I didn't leave, you know. And they were like, well, we got some work if you want to do it. Are you interested? And they kind of explained it to me. And I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm interested in it, you know. And they go, how are you? Are you proficient with firearms, things like that? And I go, well, I mean, I grew up, you know, knowing how to use them, but I don't know if I'm proficient or not. You have to tell me. And they're like, all right, well, why don't we'll try you out? And like 4 days later, I found myself going on the other side of the border. And we were going, and I was working with these guys down there. And yeah, I just kind of went from there. And that's also with those guys where I really started kind of seeing the training aspect of it. Like I had already understood on the martial arts side, but I didn't understand it on the firearm side. I didn't really get the fact that, oh, this just transitions straight across and goes right into it, and it's a whole other thing. So that's where that all kind of started, and then it just kind of went from there.
But it's so rad. Okay, so no, super interesting, because I know where we're going. You had this 20 plus year career in the surf industry. I saw you as security at the beginning of it, but there was all this leading up to it. At some point, you got a phone call or something that says, hey, Big Tony, come. How did the surf industry connection happen for you?
So I was picking up security gigs when I could. I was doing whatever I could, right? I just worked multiple jobs or whatever it takes, right? And it's still my daughter, if you ask her, she'll tell you, oh yeah, I grew up with whatever it takes. Doesn't matter. She grew up with whatever it takes. So that's how I raised my own kids, But yeah, you know, I just grinded and surfed as much as I could during the day, and then did everything that you needed to do in the dark hours. And then at one point, Fig, Rockin' Fig
from Huntington,
called me and he said, hey, I got a job if you're interested. The Bud Surf Tour needs an overnight security guy. And he goes, but we also need a water patrol guy here for the Malibu contest. And I was in Hawaii at the time. And I was like, okay. Because I'd known Fig since I was like 15, 16 years old. And
iconic Huntington guy.
Yeah,
he was the voice of the surf,
Yeah.
The surf report on
K-Rock.
On K-Rock,
Yeah,
for a
K-Rock,
long time. Had a shop on Main Street.
Yeah, it was unfortunate. He passed away a few years ago. It's a bummer. But anyway, he called me and he's like, hey, you know, you want to do this? I'm like, yeah. He goes, what do you got going on? I go, nothing. I go, I'm digging ditches and doing this and whatever. When you want me there? And he's like, you got to be here by then, you know. And so I came back over and a few days early, and then went up Malibu. Yeah, I cleared Malibu by myself on a kneeboard with pumping 6-foot Malibu. And
Hold on. That almost would sound impossible, except that I've seen you in the water before.
I wouldn't even try to do it now. I mean, I would be like, I'm not stupid enough to do that. But back then, I was a young guy, and I was all, big, way bigger than I am now, and way stronger and, dumber, so to speak. But I showed up and cleared Malibu for a whole week, and they got me a liaison. I had Angie Reno, who's a Malibu legend, 60s, 70s icon. Just, you look him up if anybody doesn't know who he is. And then one of the highlights of that contest was I got to surf with Reb Brown. Reb Brown was the original enforcer in Big Wednesday.
No way.
Yeah, and so he was a Malibu guy, and so he paddled out one day, and we were up on the top of the point, and he's like, can't surf over there? And I go, no, sir, can't. And he's all, are you the water security? And I said, yeah, I'm water patrol. And we used to have a jersey on that said Water Patrol on it. And they did, because we couldn't use skis and all that stuff back then, right? Skis were just kind of hitting in Hawaii, but they weren't being used for Water Patrol yet. Uncle Terry and Uncle Brian, those guys, they all brought those in after that stage. So at that point, he's like, well, are you going to surf? And I'm like, of course I am. And I'm like, if they go the other way, I'm going that, whatever, right? And he goes, well, can I get some waves too? And I'm like, of course you can. And we ended up surfing multiple days together during that week, and it was just a great thing. And many years later, and I want to jump the shark here, but many years later, I do a lot of work up on one of the ranch properties up in Santa Barbara, and you can probably figure that out. And at that point, one of my good friends who's up on that property, we were talking about it. I was telling him that story, and he relayed the story to one of the writers for Big Wednesday.
No way.
And when I went back up and saw him, a month or so later, I had a book that was a signed book saying, hey, thanks for letting the enforcer get some waves.
That's so rad.
And it was pretty rad. I was super stoked on that, and that was a cool thing. But that's how it started, and they gave me a job right after that. They basically said, okay, lowers, 2 weeks.
So this would have been the ASP at the time.
This was the Bud Surf Tour. It was owned by Body Glove and the Maestros.
Yep.
Yeah, and at that point, I found myself 2 weeks later down at Lowers and Trestles, and it was myself and Moses Paskowitz, and we actually almost played football against each other, but we never did. Mo's he's 2 years older than me, but he big guy and the whole bit. And of course, the Paskowitz family and the history. Ultimately, Mom and Dad were in my wedding, my first wedding, and I'm still super close. I talk to Izzy all the time, and a lot of the other family and whatnot. But they were another big influence on me. That Paskowitz family was a huge influence on me. And so Moses and I cleared Lowers for a week straight because there was no waiting periods. You had 5 days to run a contest, that was it. And we got to camp out on the beach and stay overnight and do the whole bit. And so when the contests were over, we were turning the floodlights out onto the point, turning on Hendrix, and we were surfing all night. It was pretty rad.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So here's the full surf kid. You're doing not so much odd jobs, but you're bouncing, you're doing private security, you're sanding boards, you're bouncing back and forth, you're kind of trying to figure it out, you're doing stuff. Did everything change with that phone call from Fig?
100%.
That's so cool.
100%. The phone call from Fig and the phone call from my friends that called me to go work in Mexico that first time. That's what really kind of changed, because ultimately what I ended up doing is I ended up running a dual career for 30 years. I ran a 30-year career in the surf industry, and I've run a 30-plus year career on the security side. And I'm supposed to be semi-retired right now, but I run our security business, and it's full time, without a doubt, plus the other business. But yeah, that's where those two phone calls were the very pivotal moments of my career my careers for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you're working security for the Bud Surf Tour.
Yep.
And you're catching a lot of waves. And having and you're now getting connected with all the names in. So here's a surf kid. Now you're getting connected with all the people in the surf world.
Yep.
When did it go from that to going from working in security and water patrol to actually going in-house with surf brands? Does it just happen now? Like, what's the next step?
Great question. So, and I just want to be clear too, when we started doing water patrol here for the Bud Surf Tour, Water Patrol didn't exist here on the mainland. I actually had to make sure that it was okay out of Hawaii to be able to call it water patrol when we were running water patrol.
So you kind of branded it as like a water patrol role.
It was a water patrol role when we first started it. I still have my original XL water patrol vest that Ed Diascoli made for us when we did all those. But yeah, we had at the time. It's like, hey, they want us to do water patrol in Hawaii or in California. Are everybody good with that? And they were like, oh yeah, shoot, you guys are good. Do it right on. And it was, that was cool. That's how it was back then. You had to, you didn't want to step on anybody's toes. So that's how it all started. Wow. Eventually, I worked my way through. I worked I did the night security at night, watched all the scaffolding and all the stuff, and then I was doing the water patrol during the day, and I tried to sleep when I could in between water sessions. And then a couple of years into it, the beach marshal position opened up, and I became the beach marshal because I didn't want to have to work nights anymore. And I became the beach marshal.
And what's the role of the beach marshal? Because I think this is what I used to see you doing at the contest,
right? You and I probably kind of linked up. So beach marshal roles, and you're checking the competitors in, you're giving them their jerseys, you're telling them the rules, 3 to the beach, this is a point break interference, whatever it is, right? And I like that because I was working during the day like the rest of the crew. I was off at night. I could actually get a full night's sleep, but I was still in charge of the security, so I would oversee the night guys. We didn't need water patrol anymore after that second year I was on, because now the counties or the cities were starting to issue permits. And with that, the lifeguards could actually shut the water down. Prior to that, nobody could shut the beach down. The Coastal Commission or whoever was, the cities themselves, you can't shut the water down. So they would hire guys like me or Moses or anybody else, like our guys in Hawaii, and they would just basically send us out there and basically say, hey, get out of the water or else. And it worked back then. Not everybody was super happy back then like they are now. So, yeah. And that's how I kind of transitioned, and I worked as the beach marshal all the way to the end. I eventually went on to the ASP when it was still the ASP.
Really?
And at that point, my last year on the tour, I brought the U.S. Open of surfing to Huntington Beach in, I think it was 96, 97. Don Meek was the owner. He was with Prime Ticket. Ian Cairns was a big role in that as well, and because he was working as the director for the Bud Surf Tour, and then I was part of that whole crew that brought it there. And
we love Don Meek. Don's been in this chair, and I'll be with him this weekend.
I owe Don a call. Don, if you're listening to this, I apologize. I haven't called you back yet. He called me. He texted me. He wants to come out and train, and so I promise you I will call you back, Don.
So great. So I didn't realize that you took it. Well, I guess that's where I would have seen you. Would have been most likely at Huntington, because I didn't travel to contests. I'd be at the local ones, and then I'd see you at parties locally where you were managing that stuff as well. So you were just saying that you brought the U.S. Open of Surf to Huntington.
Yep, brought the U.S. Open of Surfing to Huntington. That was my last year. Threw a raging party in my front yard in Huntington. I had everybody, you pick a name, they were there. Mm-hmm. I had all of the original bronze Aussies were in my front yard. Uncle Ben was there. I mean, we had everybody there. We had a bucket of kava at the gate. You had to drink a bowl before you could come in. You had to dump the Bilu or you couldn't come into the party.
Wow. High tide, right?
High tide. And it was so good. So that was my last year on the tour. And then from there, my daughter had been born. She was about a year and a half, I think, at that point. And I realized that I couldn't be on the road like that much anymore. I was still poaching, traveling security gigs here and there. And then I eventually was like, hey, I got to stay home. What can I do? And I eventually got a job at the original Billabong.
Okay, Stop there for a second. Yep. Let me just ask you this. So again, kind of what I was saying before. Surf kid, spending a lot of time in Hawaii, growing up with the Samoan family, very much into the surf world, but growing up with no money and a little, like a little thrifty surfboard. Yep. Now you've got all the iconic, of all age, generations of the best surfers in the world calling you Big Tony, hanging out with you at the beach, coming to your house for a party. Like, how did that feel?
Amazing. Felt like you were a part of the mix, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I was like, there's a time in your life where you want to be like those guys, or you want to be like that group. You want to be part of that group. And then you get to a certain point in your life where you're like, F those guys. I want to be my own. I'm my own program, right? And it's funny, like I'm very much my own program. Anybody that knows me well enough will tell you that I go to my own beat. Like I don't follow anybody's stuff. And I remember when I felt that way, like, hey, these guys are all really good friends, but I'm doing my own thing. Like I'm my own guy. I want to go my own directions. And it was good to be connected to them, but at the same time, it was also good to go and find my own path and do my own thing. So everybody wanted to be a stand-up server. I was a kneeboarder. I mean, that's what I mean. So that's kind of how it all kind of worked out.
Well, it looks like it's worked out pretty freaking well.
Not bad. I mean, it's besides Bill Sharp, and I think Bill Sharp and I are probably the two farthest accomplished kneeboarders, I think,
out of
in the
area?
industry. Legendary, of course, is Rex Huffman and some of the other guys. But yeah, so.
Rad. I love that story. I mean, listen, that's when I knew you. You were in the middle of the mix. And we all, as kids here, growing up here surfing, because I wasn't in the mix, like we wanted to be in the parties that you were bouncing. We wanted to be, talking to the guys. We wanted to be at the house party at your house in the front yard. Like that's how I know you from all that time. So it's really amazing that you made that all happen. After the ASP, you said you got a job at the original Billabong. What did that look like, and where'd that go?
Yeah, I knew I needed to get off the road, and I needed to be home, because when my daughter was starting to go, like, she'd see my bag, and she's like, she knew I was leaving. It wasn't a good thing. So, and my former wife was like, you gotta be home more, and it's funny too, because during that time, kind of like what we were talking about in the parking lot, when I was listening to your podcast with Tom the other day, Tom McElroy, T-Mac. Old friend of mine, early surf industry days. Even we were surfing Southside together a bunch, and he said something about his college professor. I'm like, why are you living your dad's life? Like, what's your major? What's this? Why are you doing that? Do your own thing, kind of thing. And my mom actually asked me one day. She goes, when are you going to quit this surfing shit and get a real job? And I remember that stuck with me. Like, that surfing shit actually gave me a career, gave me a lifestyle, provided for my family, and I was able to. Retire from that after X amount of years, 30 years, all said and done. So that was kind of a cool thing. So I was around that same time. So I called Paul Gomez and asked him, I said, hey, I need to get a job. And, he talked with Bob, if I remember correctly, and they put me in touch with Tony Kiala. And next thing I know, I got a job in the warehouse at Billabong here in Costa Mesa. And I was pulling and packing orders. I didn't know how to do anything other than I was, security guy. They didn't need security, I did the security for the parties, but I was packing orders and with a bunch of the really cool guys in that warehouse. One of them I'm still really good friends with, Jeffrey James, who's a very well-known denim designer in the industry still. He was with us at Volcom eventually too. And then, I just kind of went from there and packed orders. And then one day, I was still working a bunch of jobs. I was still sanding and polishing boards at night.
Really?
I was working with Mark Nakashima. I was working for Butch at Spanners. I was wiping boards for Seiko, whoever I could pick up boards for, and then I was bouncing, and I was still picking up security gigs every now and then. Even Zeldo gave me a couple jobs, writing a couple articles, Zeldo of all people. So, and then one day, my first real mentor in the surf industry came to me and said, hey man, are you interested in being my assistant? And I'm like, absolutely.
Who is that?
Mark Machado. And you know Mark Machado?
I don't, but I know of him.
So Mark Machado is he was the accessory and wetsuit designer for the original Billabong. He's an icon in my eyes. He's gold in my book. He was the part of the team that invented the zipperless wetsuit for Billabong back in the day, and was instrumental in doing that. They won an IDSA award for that. It was a big deal. And Yankus was part of that too, and Mike Yankus, and there were a couple other folks that were a part of that. But Billabong and Bob and those, everybody had that. That was it. So I became his assistant, and I learned how to make accessories and wetsuits. And eventually I became his production manager, and all the way through until Billabong became Hurley. And at that point, we got a phone call. We all got a phone call on a Sunday morning. And I remember it was John Watkins and I were living together on 7th and Pecan. And I got the call and I walked out the house and I'm like, what's going on? He goes, hey, I just want to give you a heads up that Bob just came back from Australia, and he told Gordon that I'm not going to renew the license after 30 years or whatever it was. And he goes, I'm going to start my own thing. And on Monday we were Hurley, and Amazing. We all showed up and had a town hall meeting, and I think we're in the warehouse. And at that point we got introduced to the very first, or the new icon. And my biggest concern wasn't about, we're gonna be a new company. I got to change stickers on my boards in my truck. You know, something stupid like that. And
but how long were you at Billabong before the transition to Hurley happened?
I'm gonna say it was probably about 5 years.
And how was that experience under Mark and getting you went from you got a whole new education, a whole new career
Complete
started.
education, and really got started off on my true career in the surf industry. Hey, this is an opportunity for me not to be, that's Big Tony, the security guy. This is Big Tony that's going to be a guy that's going to become something in the industry at some point in time. Because it's funny, in the Volcom days, towards the very end of the Volcom days, there was a person that I'm going to remain nameless that looked right at me after he had too much to drink, and he looked at me and he goes, nobody's ever going to rise to the top with a name like Big Tony. And I looked right at him, and I had two options. One of them I was going to, do my thing, or the other option was, okay, I'll show you. All right. And sure enough, I went pretty far as far as I go, coming from nothing. So I was pretty happy with it. But Billabong was great. I learned a lot. Mark was just, he's still a great friend today. He's collaborated actually with me on a couple things. He's very, interested in this and doing some stuff with this. And he ended up going to the new Billabong shortly after we became Hurley. I stayed on at Hurley, although I was kind of butthurt that he didn't take me with him, just because I thought I was his guy, But he left me there, and later on, he eventually told me, he goes, I left you there because you needed to see if you could handle it or not. He goes, you couldn't just stay with me the whole time, right? And he went on to have an amazing career at the new Billabong. He mentored several other folks there and gave them careers, which is just awesome. This is a guy who came out of Santa Cruz, and I love telling this story, and he probably doesn't want me to tell the story, Mark, but I love telling the story. There's a guy who was come out of Santa Cruz, pro surfer. You would look at him and go that guy is never going to be a pro surfer. He's this short and stocky and whatever. Guy ripped. And he designed the O'Neill Heat Series wetsuit line while he was homeless living out of his car.
Yeah. Wow.
That's the kind of guy this guy is. Talk about drive and fortitude and all these things. And he was the guy that really, in the surf industry side, that taught me whatever it takes. And I remember the first time he asked me, we got a ship in a wetsuit, and he's like, can you stay tonight and work? And I'm like, yeah. And he's all, right on. And I was all excited about it. And he was looking at me like I was crazy. Because we were there at 11, 12 o'clock at night unpacking wetsuits and doing QC on them, And I was all excited about it. And he's the one that really kind of showed me, hey, whatever it takes, you get it done, no matter what, because nobody's going to do it for you. So that's where that all kind of went. And I kind of powered through. And then eventually my time at Hurley came to an end. We started to expand the team a little bit more. I had a second mentor that I didn't even realize how impactful he was on me until later on, which is Joe Knorschchild. And he was a huge impact on me, especially when I got to Volcom. I didn't realize it until then, unfortunately.
In what way?
Because of what he had done on the production side, what he had done, how he viewed production, which is eventually where I ended up. I became a production guy, which eventually then I became a supply chain guy, and then I eventually ended in my career as a product and social safety guy. But which is kind of comes full circle to what I, kind of who I am, where I started, and what I do. But he was a big mentor on me in that regard. I just didn't see it then. I was too young, and I thought I've been doing all this stuff over here. We were separated, and I should have begged to be under his wing. And at the time, I pushed away, and unfortunately, that pushing away forced me out of the company. And I remember Bob called me into his office one day. And I had a wetsuit repair that I just fixed for Bob. And at that point, he sat me down. He goes, Tony, I'm really sorry, because I know Bob for a long time. And he's like, I'm sorry. He goes, but, I got to let you go. And I'm glad it was Bob that did it, because Mark wasn't there to do it. I wouldn't want anybody else to do it. But essentially, it was a tough one. But essentially, it was because I didn't jump on board, and I should have, because I would have learned so much more. But me admitting that, it came full circle when I was going to Billabong or Volcom later on, because Joe K played a role in it. So from there I left. I was gone from Hurley. I went down, and Ian Cairns called me, and I went down to Wave Action magazine, and I was down there for a really short stint, but met some really cool people: Dustin Humphreys, Eric Apple. We all worked together, and
pretty well-known guys if you're in that world.
Yeah, we're super cool guys. Eric's become what he's become as far as the MMA side goes, and announcing motocross and race trucks and things like that. Dustin Humphrey, very well accomplished photographer. Even though back then he was asking me, "Can I just get 2 rolls of film?" It was pretty funny. And then he started Deus Ex Machina, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
Bali based guy,
stuff, yeah.
and obviously Ian Cairns, Bronze Aussie,
Kanga,
icon.
Kanga's the Kanga, and so on. And so at that point, I went down there for a couple months, and then I got picked up by Rusty, which was at the time the license for C was through CNC. And I went over to CNC and worked at Rusty's. I had Rusty Sanook and Red Sand, and I was doing product development and
We
production
play the
there.
name game all day long with all of the mutual friends that we have between all those different organizations.
Got to work with Rick Laura there. I met one of my good brothers, Chad Godfrey, there. J.D. Henley was there. A lot of us got to work there. Brillo was gone at that
Darren
point.
Brillhart.
He was off doing his thing. But we, Ronnie Nelson was, we were all working together. All of us, we were all part of it.
Yeah, for
Plus,
sure.
I got to actually do a lot of stuff with Rusty himself, because RDOT and CNC were so connected, but then at the same time so removed too. So that was an interesting time. Wasn't my favorite time, but I got a lot of heavy exposure into Southeast Asia at that point, and that started setting the precedence for me going overseas and working on the manufacturing side. Paul and Dak Clark were great about that. And it was, I remember in the 2-year period I was there, I think I went to Asia like 8 times.
Wow.
Which was because I was doing footwear, I was doing all kinds of stuff, which was good. And I had originally gone to Asia when I was with Hurley, originally, with Bob.
Tell me, at that time, just because it's super interesting, and a lot of people, if you're in production, you spend a lot of time in Asia, regardless of what footwear could be making anything.
Yeah.
With your kind of Polynesian ties, Samoa, Hawaii, and Southeast Asia, like how did you find it?
Asia?
Yeah.
Oh, I loved it. Oh yeah, Asia was super. It was easy for me. I mean, granted, I was an anomaly. So you walk around, you're standing in line, and you're just going anywhere. And all they want to do
I hadn't thought of that. Right.
All they want to do is touch you. Yeah, they want to touch you or take pictures with you. They want to pull your beard. They want to, are these real? It's pretty crazy. Many years later, I took my wife with me on a trip, and she went 3 weeks over through Asia with me, and she was just cracking up. And she was their own anomaly, to be honest with you, too, because of big blue eyes and that kind of thing. And all they want to do is like just touch you and be next to you, and they trip on you.
So interesting.
So that was it. But I mean, I enjoy the food. I enjoy the process of it. I'm a process guy for sure, and it even translates into what we do today. But I was, because prior to that, the time when we were going to Asia, that very first trip that I was going to Asia with Bob, it was Bob, Joe K, Ronnie Brim, and myself. We didn't really go to Asia before that much. Everything was done via, hey, you faxed everything over, or it was email. Yes, kids, fax. You don't know what that is either.
Right.
And everything was sent over there. And I remember cutting POs and sending stuff via fax, and there would be just, a trail of things going down the hallway to try to run through the fax machine. It was pretty funny. But then we finally was like, hey, you've got to be boots on the ground. And that's when we first started getting exposed to it. And so, I started going to Asia heavily during the CNC days. And then at the end of my tenure at CNC, after about 2 years, I was off for a while, and I was just kind of like, see some feelers out there. I actually had a meeting with Wooly and J-Dog when I left Hurley before I went to CNC, and they just weren't ready for it yet. They didn't really need anybody like me yet. And then I got a call from a guy named John Fernley. And he and I worked at the original Billabong together, and he's become an industry icon in his own right.
Yeah.
And we had remained friends during that time, and he called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "Surfing. I'm cruising right now, And he's like, "Well," he goes, "You want to come up and talk about coming to work with Volcom?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And I went up there and had a meeting with him and J-Dog. And
so when you talked to Wooly and Steris, they just weren't big enough for your experience, because when you're working at Billabong, they were already big. At that time, Volcom was still small. Is that why they weren't ready for you?
Yeah, I think Volcom was like $11 million at that time. So this was the transition between. So again, within 2 years, they were about 11 million, and then 2 years later, I'm having my meeting with J-Dog and Fernley, and they're at 48.
Yeah, they blew up. And that's early 90s.
That's early. Actually, no, this is early 2000s.
Oh, early 2000s?
Yeah, this is early 2000s. So this would have been 2000, 2001. It was right at the tail end. And so, so within 2 years, they went from 11 to 48. And at that point, we were pretty much gonna do it. I was gonna come on board as the accessory production manager, and then 9/11 hits. 9/11 hit, and everything got put on hold. And it was about a 3-week window there. And then the other guy that was handling not only T-shirts but accessories as well, Nate Schill. I think at some point in time, from my understanding, the conversation was, you got to do something. He was drowning. He just had too much on his plate. Mm-hmm. And Nate he's an icon on the T-shirt printable side, like a Dwight Dunn, But for us, for Volcom, it was Nate. And he went on to have a great, successful career. And then he eventually got into real estate. I think they're living up in Oregon now. But so at that point, John went to J-Dog and I think talked to J-Dog and talked to Renee Wolcott, which is Woolie's dad. And my understanding is that Renee came down to Nate and said, "Who is this guy, Big Tony?" And Nate kind of filled him in, and he goes, "Well, is he worth it?" And you think about what we made back then, it was like nothing compared to like where we ended at the end of our careers. And he's like, "Yeah, and I need it. We need him now," because he's the guy for accessories at the time. At least how it was presented to me. And he goes, "Right." And he walked in the front of his office and said, "Go get him." And I started the following week. And I started Volcom 2001 and right very beginning of 2001. And then 4 days later, they were trying to get me, they were inviting me to go to the Tabby trip, the Volcom Tabby trip. I'm like, I remember walking to Furley's office, I go, "Can I go on that trip?" He goes, "No, you're not going on that trip." He goes, "One, you just started. 2, he goes, "I'm not going on that trip, so you're not going on that trip." And a couple of years later, we ended up going on that trip, and that's what really set my feet in the sand in Tavarua, where I've been going for 20 plus years.
We will definitely talk about that because
So,
I know you've been there
more
than most,
deal.
right?
So, so I started out as a production manager for accessories, and that was an amazing time. That brand, I'll tell you what.
It was a rocket ship at that time.
We could paint stones on boxes and sell them, no problem. Just the paper, the cardboard box, we could sell them, no problem. But
who designed the stone?
Tom McElroy, of course.
Right.
Tom McElroy did for sure. We won't go into the name Volcom, how it's all put together, but we'll leave that part to somebody else.
Tom
Did he
talked
talk about it?
It was like Velocity and Malcolm, because I guess that was Woolie's nickname, Malcolm and Velocity.
And Woolie's nickname was part of it, and the whole bit. Yeah. So
but I never knew that.
That's not for me to tell.
But the Volcom thing was an enigma because there was all this. It was part of the allure. Because they never talked about where the name came from. They never talked about what the stone was. And so for decades, it was like, again, it was like, what is this thing? And it was, at the same time, it was youth culture explosion.
Yep.
And they led everything. And you were in the middle of that.
Establishment, 100%. And actually, I was with Volcom since 93. I started doing their security for all their parties in 93. Volcom started in 91. And I remember when Eckert, because he was a pro surfer on the Bud Surf Tour, when he first showed up and he had a stone on his board and he had a trucker hat. Very first piece that they made was a trucker hat, foam, old school trucker hat that stayed with us all the way through our entire tenure.
Tom, when he was sitting here, had a yellow Volcom shirt on.
I saw that.
And he had the safety pin. I was like, "You can afford a shirt." He goes, "This is the original shirt."
Yep. And I thought, after seeing that the other night, I almost wore the pinkest punk that we were just talking about. And I was like, because I just found it yesterday or day before yesterday. I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Do my own. I got my own thing. Of course, I'll run my own jam, right?
For sure.
So anyway, I just I stayed there. We had a great run. We could do anything. Nobody touched us in the industry. And I can confidently say that when we showed up somewhere or we were doing an event or we were throwing a party of any kind, everybody wanted to be there. Everybody was there.
I was one of them.
And if you couldn't get into that party, you were bummed.
I couldn't get into most of those.
And we could walk in as a group, and all the Volcom guys, they're all here, and it was carte blanche. It was a magical time.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that's when and you were the center of it. This is the part about you that I didn't know anything about this production side.
Yeah.
I just always saw you at those events,
yeah,
whether I could get in or not, in the middle of that mix. I didn't know anything about this. So, Tony, you also, through all of this, through production, you go on to get more education.
Yeah.
Right? What'd you do?
Yeah. So we got through 2008, and then of course 2008 the recession hit. That was the first time in Volcom's history that we laid off. We laid off 22 people, And unfortunately, it was a really rough, turbulent time, but then we bounced back and we recovered from that. At that point in time, we were able to recover. We picked up momentum. We were still going strong. And then, if I remember correctly, it was 2010, 2011, give or take. We ended up going, 2010, we went public. And at that time, it was the right time. I'm sure Tom talked about that. And then we went public and we had the IPO, and those of us that were all played a major role in it. We were all given options, and which was great, and we all thought we had retirements. It was going to be awesome. And then, like, whoever thought that you could retire from a surfing job?
Right.
You know, you'd be surf industry, guy could retire. You know, and we knew, of course, about the McKnights and the Nades and the Bobs and everybody, right? But you're never going to be that guy, right? Well, a lot of guys became those guys, which is awesome. But then in 2000, if I remember correctly, it was 2012-ish, 11 maybe. I can't remember exactly. We sold, and we ended up selling to a company called PPR, which eventually changed their name to Caring. And at that point, we were taken over by a very large company that owned Puma and Gucci and so on, a bunch of other Yves Saint Laurent and a bunch of other high brands, highfalutin brands. And we were also then being immersed with a lot of folks that were, in my opinion, were highly educated in global supply chain. John Fernley was a huge proponent of like having a solid production machine. Production drove the ship, right? And that comes from his time with Joe Kay. Mm-hmm. And later on, when I was getting ready to get hired by Volcom, I had lunch with Joe Kay, and Joe Kay told me that Fernley called him. And Joe Kay, after I met and had lunch with Joe Kay, that he called Fernley and said, green lighted me and basically said, you need to hire Tony. He's definitely changed, right? Mm. And our relationship was extremely solid for a lot of years there. So with that, when we got immersed into that side of things, we all looked around and we were like, okay, can we sit at this table with these guys? Mm. You're sitting across from people that are dealing with $1 billion in business. And, can you sit at that table and have those conversations? And I'll never forget having a conversation with a very good friend of mine, Jason Graham, who we call him Slims. He's still with the new Volcom now, the third generation of Volcom, I guess you could say. He's still with them. He's he's in charge of their merchandising and design, I think. And he's finally a VP. Should have been a VP 15 years ago, but anyway, there you go, Slims. Love you, buddy. But we were talking about this before, and I remember saying this, like, I remember, he goes, remember when you sat there and you asked me, he goes, all right, do you think I'm educated enough to sit at the table with these guys? And he's like, absolutely, because you come from literally grassroots, ground up, just like everything I've done. It's just like I learned at the bottom level,
You've
like
done
I did
it
in the warehouse, and you learn the whole business picture. And so I remember when I was sitting there going like, okay, all right, we can do this. And then all of a sudden I realized that I got to learn some new things, because this is a fast machine that's way bigger now than what our Volcom bubble was. And at that point, I had heard that a coworker was going to school. She'd gone back to school, and she became a great friend, Diana Braden, who became head of production design after Fernley left, and went and started his own thing. And I talked with her, and she had me talk to our HR team, and I was one of maybe like, I think there's probably less than 5 of us that they sent back to school. And I ended up going to the University of San Francisco and going through their trade school, getting a master's in supply chain management. Wow. Yeah, and so at that point, plus some other certs that go with it. But that was a huge step, because then sitting at that table with some pretty heavy hitters that have been doing global supply chain stuff since the 70s in Asia. And in other parts of the world, I could sit there confident, look them in the face, and say, "No, we don't do it that way. This is how we're going to do it." Or you know what? Yeah, I really like that idea. Or I could recognize that, hey, you know what? That's a better process. Let's adopt that. That was also when I got my first taste of sustainability, true sustainability, as well as compliance, social and regulatory compliance. And that's where ultimately I ended up at the very end of it. That's where I ended up kind of focusing my time.
Tony, thank you for sharing all that. And with my experience in the hardware world and supply chain, I know how complicated and fast moving and pretty amazing how fast that technology changes. And so having your master's in that, pretty cool. Not bad for a kid that was on welfare, first kid to go to college. Well done, dude. Can you quickly talk about some of this, the fair labor stuff that you got involved in? Real quick overview, because it's super rad, and I'm guessing it had an impact on you. It must have.
Yeah, absolutely. I was continuing to do supply chain and production stuff. I made it up to director, and I was a director all the way up until I think probably my last, 3-4 years at Volcom. And then we were getting a lot of pressure from Caring at the time to be more sustainable, kind of fall in line with what their standards were. And Derek Sabori was really heading our sustainability program. Derek was a huge influence on me from the sustainability side. We kind of joked because we traveled together a few times too, and it was like he was the environmental component and I was the human component of it. So I was learning that side of the business. We ended up joining the AAFA. We were heavily involved with the CPSC.
What are those organizations?
These are regulatory organizations or associations that were in the garment or apparel industries. American Apparel and Footwear Association. We were the only action sports brand originally that was as part of that. And we were definitely a different animal when we showed up, right? This dude shows up, right? Buttoned all the way up and sleeve down.
But the goal of those, whether it was Keurig or Volcom or whatever, but the high level goal of these programs that you were working in is to do what? Foster what?
The goal was to put out a more sustainable product, to put out a better sustainable message, and have it resonate with our followers. We had a demographic that was so influential at that time that it's very different than it is now. But they were so influential, and if they latched on to what we were doing, it would go global without a doubt. And any of our guys, any of those guys can tell you that, and that was what they wanted us to do.
Pretty rad.
It was pretty rad if you think about it. Unfortunately, the funding didn't allow us to go as deep and as big as we probably could have. But we were able to do some stuff, and it was, Derek really, he pulled a lot off with very little. I got a fairly good budget towards the end there that pushed me into the fair labor side, learning a lot more and transitioning out of your traditional production or supply chain side, and now focusing on human beings. And ultimately, that's where that took me in the last 2 years of that career, 3 years of that career. We did, early on, we created a program called PASS, Product and Social Safety a program, which was our regulatory compliance. We were testing every component, fabric, anything that you can think of to make sure that it was safe for you as the user or consumer to be able to have on your body. It wasn't going to leach into your skin.
Wow.
If somebody inhaled a button by chance or a shank or something like that, they weren't going to get sick from lead poisoning and that kind of thing. So we regulated and fell in compliance with state and government regulations, federal regulations. And so that was the first step of it. And then the social aspect of it dropped into it as well. And it became the only program in the action sports industry, sports lifestyle industry, as it was called towards the end there, that had a program that was that robust. Nobody had a program like that. So they had smaller programs. The closest one would have been Patagonia. And even then, theirs was more on the sustainability side, not as heavily on the people like ours was. And that's where I saw that was my calling. That's where I needed to go, and that's what I needed to really push. And so I started driving what I was doing in my team. I had a global team of I think 9 or 12 people, something like that. And that's where I was trying to push everything on my end too.
Rad.
But it was tough. It was tough to do because we started not doing as well as we should have been doing as a company and things like that, and it made it difficult. But ultimately, I got to do some launch some really good projects in India and whatnot, and that was kind of like the highlight of my career as far as the surf industry goes.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, 20 years, 19 years at Volcom, and then it came to an end.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. I wish we could go deeper into that. I love that kind of sustainable, and those programs are so valuable for companies on both sides, the human side and the product side. And I'm sure it left a giant mark. It seems like there's an underlying theme, maybe as you got older or whatever, but like Tony likes to protect people and support people. And like, I don't know, there's something there, like for sure. 100%. And then you bring in the Polynesian world. So real quickly, I know you got to go to Tavarua a lot. we're gonna jump into this in just a second.
no worries.
Call it chapter 2.
Yeah.
Tell us about Tavarua for you.
Oh wow. Well, Tavarua is the best place on earth. There's no other way to put it.
A heart-shaped island in the middle of Fiji.
With people with smiles as big as me, you know, and yeah, it's a pretty magical place. The people are magic. Of course, the waves are magic. But that's, you know, we go there because of the relationships we build with the people. And I truly have people, and now second and third generations of people there that are family. You know, without a doubt, they're our Tavarua family. My family's deeply immersed into the island now, and the villages that are there that inhabit those islands, and it's a pretty amazing place. So yeah, I got to go with Volcom originally, and I've never not gone back since. I've been on the regular pretty much all the way through. Became a group leader in 2010 after the recession. Volcom couldn't maintain their week every year, and they came to me when we were at the trade show in San Diego. And they were like, hey, do you want to take the week over? And I called my wife. I said, she goes, absolutely, do it. And we ran that group solid for solid 10 years. And then at that point, we started opening it up to outside folks to be able to come on because we weren't able to really fill that weekend by ourselves, but we were still going on the trip. At the same time, I got invited to become a boatman. And because I had a medical background on the TACMed side. Or just medical in general. And of course, you know, I was a boat guy. I've got a boat that I keep up in Ventura that I run out to the islands and up to other locations on the West End a lot. And so I've been on boats most of my life, and I can, you know, keep an eye on folks, and I wear fins, so I can swim pretty good. So yeah, it made sense.
Well, here's the other thing: it's all lefts. How?
Not all of it.
Well, there's a right. That's true.
There's a couple rights, actually.
But as a kneeboarder, there is no backside. You're always going.
That's not true.
Is that not? No, that's not true.
Yeah, we do have backsides.
Really?
We have a front and a backside.
Okay.
I'm a regular foot in the normal circle. I'm right-handed, so I would be. If you ever see, I'll be twisted just slightly to the right.
Got it.
But it's funny. You look at my Fiji boards, you know, and I would pull them out of my locker every time, and you clearly see that I'm positioned.
In a certain way.
I'm surfing left,
but
you can see I'm positioned surfing left as a regular foot.
So we're talking to somebody that's been more barreled than almost any other surfer on the planet.
No,
if you're spending
John
that much,
Roseman. That would be John Roseman. That would not be me.
Okay, take John Roseman out of it, who's one of the owners of Tavarua. If you're a boatman and you spend that much time on Tavarua, you know how to get barreled you've been barreled very, 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 very well and very many times.
Trust me, I've had my share, and I'm greedy, and I want more. Don't even kid. I will say that wholeheartedly.
That's so
But
great.
yeah, I've been fortunate enough to, because of the Volcom trips initially, when we had the Volcom Fiji Pro in 2012, 2013, I was there for those events. I was part of the staff that was running the events. I was actually the boat marshal, not the beach marshal. I came out of retirement. That was kind of the joke. Kelly and I would talk about that a lot. And I was on the boat during both those events, especially the 2012 event, where that was the biggest recorded surfing event in history. There's never been a
was that Code Red?
That was the Code Red swell, and that was pretty awesome to be on Belmari right there. That was my office, you know, front row at Cloud Break, and it's 3 stories high. So being a part of that whole thing, being able to be a big part of when we called the contest, when to do it, kind of gave some advice as to, hey, let's keep our water patrol out here. I was talking to Woolley and Doherty, you know, on the island. They're like, what do you see? What do you think? And I'm like, if we're going to do this, we got to keep our water patrol out here, keep all the safety out, keep all this stuff out, because these guys are going to go for it. The footage is going to be amazing, and people are going to get hurt.
Yeah.
And I go, so we got to protect them. And so ultimately, that was the decision. And you guys can look up the footage. I mean, yeah.
Is that when Bruce lost his pants?
No, I think that was on a different. That was on a different swell. But that was the swell where Guadalcas paddled out on a 6'6" and took off on it and just was like literally, I don't know how he made it at the bottom, but he did. And then every big wave surfer in the world was there at that time. And ultimately, the funny thing was I finally came off the boat because I knew the waves were going to be good on the island. And I came in, ate some food, went over. I got sucked into the announcer booth. Wassel saw me, threw his headset at me, and he goes, I'm going surfing. And I'm like sitting there commentating with Cote and Alex Gray. And Alex is jonesing. He wants to get out there and get some. And Wassel goes out and gets 2 cover shots on one wave. Borg picks him up as he's paddling back out. And he goes, I'm going to go get another. And Borg goes, you're done.
Done.
Hands him, got him to the boat. They hand him a beer, and Wassel was done. He got two covers off of that wave.
That's a yellow board photo.
Yeah, totally.
So what's pretty amazing, Tony, you're talking, the names you drop, like, because they're good friends of yours, like, these are the best surfers in the world. You're like, oh, Kelly Slater. Like, you're talking about
that guy.
Kai Board, like all these guys. These are just guys in your circle that most of us look up to as, people will never interact with most likely. You've come a long way.
Yeah, I mean, they're human just like everybody else is,
For sure, but they're the best surfers in the world and pretty iconic.
Some of the best watermen in the world for sure. Yeah. But you know what? They're some of the best people in the world too. I got to be honest with you. I mean, I've known Kelly since he was 15, and I've known his brother longer, and his mom, just great people. And I still text with Kelly all the time. We see each other at the surf ranch, and every now and then, not as often as I'd like to, but yeah.
Not
and
bad.
he was instrumental in me going up there for the first surf contest that they held during 16, doing the security for it.
Well, and that was my next question. You've been to the surf ranch once or twice or 87 times.
Yeah, so not 87 times, but the surf ranch they're one of my clients actually. So I go up there and I train their water safety guys and I train their security guys. They have, a small security team there, and we go up and focus on their scope. And then the water safety guys and the surf coaches and surf guys, I train them every year. And I tell you, they are one of the funnest groups of people to be around. They're just, what Connie and Matt Rome have done up there with, as well as all the other staff that are up there, what they've done with all those guys up there, and that culture that they've built around what Kelly's vision was in the very beginning. I mean, it's just such a magical place. And even for somebody who doesn't surf, they go up there and get a chance to experience that. It's pretty amazing. I'm just very fortunate that I can wrap in a surf every now and then with some business. It works out pretty good. This year was actually interesting because I went off of one ranch training their staff.
Another good place to go
very
hang
good
your
place
hat, right?
to surf sometimes if you know how to get there.
Yep.
And then going right to that ranch like 2 days later and doing the exact same thing. And that was a pretty magical week. I got to be honest with you.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we're bouncing around a little bit, and we're going to get here in a second because I want to close it all out talking about your businesses.
Yeah.
Know your roots. It's on your shirt. I've heard this quote tied to you. Culture is a big part of you. Just talk about maybe that quote or just culture in you and how that all fits in.
Yeah. Know your roots I've been saying it for, I don't even know how long. I couldn't tell you, honestly. I know that I started using it on Instagram in 2012 because we were all in Tavarua, and Alex Gray and Nikki Kerr set my first Instagram up in 2012. And I didn't even know how to set the damn thing up. And we were in the airport flying home, and Nikki grabbed my phone. Alex got a hold of it, and I've been on Instagram ever since.
Classic.
And I remember somebody saying like, "Hey, you got to have a tagline or something like that." And I'm like, "Well, I always say know your roots, And I just put a hashtag know your roots or something like that, and it's been on there ever since. And every single post has got it. So that's where that started. I made some T-shirts. We do the Boatman Nation shirt stuff as well for our boatmen, on Tavarua and whatnot. But yeah, it's that's where that comes from. And really what it means is just, hey, stay true to yourself. Run your own program. And you look out for others. Provide care for those in need is another slogan that I have that I use a lot. And just treat everybody as a friend until proven otherwise. So that's
I love that.
Yeah, and Uncle David Nuhiva is the one that actually taught me that back in the day.
That sounded very Hawaiian.
Yeah. Everyone's a friend until proven otherwise, and that was a big thing that he was a
good one.
A big proponent of for sure. So with that said, my tenure at Volcom finished in 2020. Unfortunately, due to COVID, there was an opportunity for me to be wrapped up. I was a higher salary, and it was an easy way to get rid of one of the barnacles. And so that I got scraped with 65 other people. Wow. Unfortunately, and it was a sign too. It was a sign to say, I put 30 years in the industry in one capacity or the other, and I mean, there's so much more we didn't cover, which doesn't matter. But I got a solid 30 years in there, and I'm done with it. And I remember my wife says to me, she goes, she came into my office one day. She goes, "What are you gonna do?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "What, are you gonna just sit in the parking lot and wait for the waves to get good, or what are you gonna do?" And I go, "I don't know. I got the internet for that, And she's like, "You need to teach." There's no. She's the teacher. She's gonna be a 30-year teacher here in a couple of years, and she'll retire. And she's like, you need to teach." She goes, "You've been teaching martial arts all these years. You've been teaching all this other stuff." She goes, "You have so much to offer not just on the surfing industry side, but you need to go back to your original skill sets and bring that all back. And because look at the climate we're in, right? And look what's going on around the world. And I was like, maybe. And I thought about it. And then eventually I was like, I was doing some work on a piece of property up in Santa Barbara during COVID after that. And they were very encouraging to send me back because they wanted medics up on the property. And so myself and one other guy went, they sent us through school. We went back, and I ended up recerting an EMT, and then eventually, recerted a bunch of other stuff and whatnot. And I ended up getting an opportunity to go train with law enforcement on the medical side. And I saw some things that were going on, and at that point, I made some suggestions, and then next thing I know, and a week later, they handed me the keys and go, okay, you run it, and let's see how it goes. And I had an opportunity to do it, and I ran it, and it's just kind of snowballed ever since. And I went back in, and so at this point, we've always had our security business, which we still have, which is Mono Group Security and Training Consultants Inc.
Mono Group,
yeah. And I knew that I definitely wanted to maintain. There it is, right there.
Yeah.
I wanted to maintain Mono because that's another thing that I've always kind of had as part of my as part of me. It was the Mono. Mono, what it means, what it stands for. It's just got so much power, but it's also got so much protection, and that's why if you look at the icon of it, it's honor, courage, protection. And it's be proud and be true to yourself. Have the courage to stand up and do things that others may not want to do or may not think is right in their eyes, and protect other people. And I think that's a big thing for me. We have that, and then after that in 21 I launched Mono Group Training Solutions, which is interesting that I have two companies that are very similar in names, but they're two very different genres. And the training solution side focuses on firearms and tactical medicine for law enforcement, first responders, and civilians alike. And I'm out teaching folks how to be safe and operate firearms safely on a weekly basis. When I'm not on the road, I'm also with law enforcement, doing a lot of other things with them that probably can't really talk about much here on this, but also running them through a lot of their field medicine, tactical medicine type of thing. We do a lot of active shooter stuff, mass casualty incident type stuff, things like that. Tactical emergency casualty care is a big part of what we do. Became a tactical emergency casualty care instructor through NAMT previously, and a whole bunch of other.
You have a lot of
stuff.
Certifications, or like it says Big Tony Alvarez, and then all these little acronyms or all these little all these certs. You have like 18 of them behind your name.
Yeah, but those ones all just say Tony or Anthony on them. They don't say Big Tony, unfortunately. But but anyway, that's where we're at today, and it's just kind of gone from there, and it's there's again with the climate that we're in, there's no shortage of work. Unfortunately, we have things that remind us every day if you watch the news, that will remind you that you need to be a better prepared citizen, without a doubt, because help is coming, but they're not going to get there as quickly as you think. And so my goal really is when I'm now putting out these classes and training, is to get the average citizen or the average officer or whatever they are, whatever their skill set or scope is, I want them to be better prepared, just so they can give somebody an opportunity to get to a higher level of care at some point. Because my job is not to save lives. The average officer on the street's job isn't to save lives, or the average lifeguard's job isn't to save lives. Our job is to stabilize that individual so somebody way smarter than us can save lives, right? We got to get them to doctors and nurses, because they're really the ones that save lives. And we just do caveman medicine, and we stabilize folks until you get them there. And I started off back in those very early of this conversation. I was technically the medic on those security teams because I would carry around a kit, and I didn't know what to use. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do anything back then other than put Band-Aids on and roll some gauze or tear them off, And I continued through all these years in this conversation we've had, I continued to learn more and more and more. And after that first Iraq War, that Desert Storm, when things were coming back from the global war on terror, I was fortunate enough, because guys I was training with, the guys I was affiliated with, I was learning new techniques of field medicine that weren't even on the internet yet, or being offered. And so when it was time, we get to 2021, I was already like, I had all this stuff in my toolbox. I just needed the search to support it. And so that's what I eventually did. And now essentially I teach full time, and that's what I do. So
You still digging it?
love it. I actually am looking forward to pulling myself away from the security business aspect of it and having my team that I have either buy it from me, hint, or take it over or whatever. And that's, because they're putting in their sweat equity on it 100% right now. And I've got a great team they're kicking ass, and I want them to benefit from it. And I want to focus on teaching. I'll never fully retire because I'm not that guy that's just going to sit around. Waves get good, I'm out. Right, meetings are still canceled. I'm going to go surf, but at the same time, I got to be doing something because you know how it is. Stillness is death, right? So I'll always teach because I get the satisfaction out of what I described earlier. If I feel that you're walking away with something that you didn't know how to do before, or now you know how to use a piece of kit that's in your kit you keep in your vehicle or whatever it is, it makes me feel a lot better. And we start out with tourniquet use, and we go into all the different aspects of it. And I see that being my long game for sure.
Rad.
And it's going pretty well. So yeah, it's pretty good. I partnered up with North American Rescue a couple of years ago, and I released some kits. This is one of them right here. This is based off of the March algorithm. And we do this for a lot of our law enforcement guys or a lot of our firearms guys, but anybody can still use this. It's a great kit to have with you. But it's based off of an algorithm that is basically your checklist and what you're going to look for first as you go down the list to make sure that you're ticking off the boxes of making sure somebody's okay.
Got it.
And then about a year later, which was about 2 years ago, I think we're coming up on 3 years. I woke up on a Sunday, unfortunately, and my wife came in and she's like, "Did you hear what happened? Did you hear what happened?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she got the news before I did that McCullough Jones had passed away down in the Telos. And after I kind of racked my head around it, because I've known the Jones family for a long time. Malia and I were in Sanook ads back in the day together, and I've known the boys since they were really, really little. Their mom would bring them over for contests, and their dad would come and whatnot, and vice versa in Hawaii and stuff too. She told me straight out, she goes, "You've got to release that kid." And I'd been sitting on this kid for like a year.
Because he bled out, is that right?
He bled out, yeah. He was finned in the groin, and he was, my understanding is he was found floating on the inside by the island, unfortunately. Yeah. My first question was not how or why did this happen. My first question was, who on the boat would have been able to take care of him if he had gotten there? And I got a very interesting look on a face that obviously will remain nameless. And it just made me this is what I've been talking about, because in the surfing community, especially like in the big wave community, but anybody that just goes out and surfs overhead waves in general, we talk about big wave hold downs. Oh, so-and-so got held down for 2 waves, right? Thank God that guy did his breathing, whatever it is. And, that guy got hit in the head with his board and he drowned, because eventually your esophagus is going to release, you're going to start taking in water, right? He had whatever happened to him, right? We never really talk about the massive hemorrhage side of it and what happens in lacerations and trauma on that level for surfing. And if you think about surfing, think about how many times you've been hit in the leg with your rail. How many times does your fin hit you in the ankle when you're sitting there just talking to somebody, and you whack and you hit your fin and you open up your ankle, you got a fish eye on your ankle. What about the nose of your board?
Yeah.
Those 3 things alone, nose, rail, fins.
More likely than all these others.
More likely than almost anything else to give you some sort of blunt force trauma, let alone laceration-based trauma. And I've been saying this for years. It's only a matter of time. So
you know what, Tony? I went through BRAG, the Big Wave Risk Assessment Group, and they're saying you guys should be surfing. If you're surfing reefs, you should be surfing with a tourniquet in your wetsuit. And I was like, really? Mm-hmm. And they're just saying having access to it. If it's not on the boat, be prepared. And they're really kind of talking about making sure that you're going in with eyes wide open to where you are. Be prepared. Don't just show up and think somebody else is going to look out for you, or somebody's going to be there for you. You've got to do everything in your power to look out for your friends, whoever you're with, et cetera.
You're your own first responder. I know it's a cliche at this point, but it could be more true. You're your own first responder. Because you know what? Help will come. The average response time in the U.S. is 7 to 12 minutes.
Wow.
Okay, so think about this. And it's funny because I released this kit a week later on Tavarua, And Sarah Lee actually helped take the photos of it and video me doing it. She's a very well-known photographer in Hawaii and also a staff photographer. She covers for Weiner when Weiner's not on the island. And so she helped me get this thing out there and put it out there. And I released this, and it was my homage. I call it the survival kit. And this kit was not this kit. This kit's very specialized. I wanted a kit that the layperson, the kid that works at Sugar Shack.
That's the one I need right there.
Right, this is the one you're going to get. I brought this for you.
No, thank you.
Anybody that surfs anywhere in the world should have one of these. And now we've got these in jet skis in Australia. We've got these in jet skis all over Maui. We've got them all over the place. And Tavarua has one of these in every boat and every ski.
Super smart.
And so what I wanted is I wanted a kit that was easy to use, that people could get trained on. They could learn how to use everything in this kit and not have to have a license, a medical license like an EMT or a CPR card or any of this stuff to be able to use this stuff and be able to make a difference and have it accessible in their vehicle, in their backpack, on their ski, or in their boat. And ultimately, I called it the Survival Kit as my homage to our surfing community, as well as a dedication to Makala because of the type of injury. Right. And he was finned in the femoral artery and very high up in the groin area, and that you can't even put a tourniquet on that kind of a wound. Yep. It requires it's a junctional bleeding. It requires a wound packing type.
Well, let me ask you this, Tony. If someone, thank you for that, and
that's for you, by the way.
Well, thank you. You know what? I think this goes back to I think about your sustainability. Like it sounds like through your career, and you're always looking out for others, whether you're paid or just on your own, or being the boatman, or all the things that you've done, like making a difference. Sounds like that's kind of a core part of who you are. If somebody wanted to get, whether it be educated or certified under you on whether it be first aid, or if they wanted to go through a process of being more prepared from a weapons perspective, like how do people track you down?
I mean, the best way to reach me, you can either reach me through the website. It's managrouptrainingsolutions.com, or you can reach me via email at bigtony@mana-group.com. Those are probably the two best ways to reach me, or just, get a hold of you and whatever it is.
For sure.
My whole thing is that I'll teach anybody, and I don't care big or small, it doesn't matter. Anybody that's potentially in a risky environment, and surfing is dangerous. Skating is dangerous. I've had some pretty key skaters. I had Grayson Fletcher in one of my courses, when we did a thing for IC, and he was so into it. Think about how many injuries the guys have skating bowls and whatnot, and ramps and street
Wild.
skating. Right. I had Blair Conklin in there. I had, Ivan Florence in the class.
These are, again, who's who of putting themselves in harm's way, skateboards, skimboards, big wave surfing.
Yeah, and just telling these guys, like, look, you guys could be the first ones there to take care of your friends before EMS or anybody else gets there. So that's how I look at it. If you mentioned Bragg, the B-Rag guys, what Greg and Hargrave and Armstrong, those guys are all doing, it's amazing. I love what they're doing. We've talked about doing some stuff together at some point. If anybody has an opportunity to go and train with those guys, do it, especially if you're a water person. If you're a paddler, a surfer, a boater, go train with those guys. They're putting out good stuff. And one of the things I know specifically that Greg likes to do is he'll take your water bottle, your Yeti, and he'll use your surf leash and create a tourniquet with it. Yeah. I do the same thing minus the Yeti, because you don't always have a Yeti with you when you get out of the water. But whatever it is, go learn from multiple people, because we all do some things a little bit different, and it's all relevant to having your toolbox, because no situation is going to be the same. Yeah. And that's my thing is if we're going to leave something on this earth, like, because you mentioned sustainability, I want to be able to leave the ability to have impact on people that's positive in a way that I know that they can impact other people. That's what I care about. I care about the fact that, I just taught this dude how to use a tourniquet or use a pressure bandage or just use a friggin' Band-Aid in a different manner. And he's going to be able to go apply that to somebody's kid at some point in time on the beach or in the harbor when you're paddling or whatever it is. That's what I care about. Yeah, I don't care about anything else other than that.
Well, if anybody's watching, you will have seen it in his eyes. If you're listening, you would have heard it in his voice. But the level of passion around this about helping others, training others, helping people be prepared is rad. And I think it just speaks volumes about who you are, what you do, how you've done it. And I love the whole path of this kid remembering food stamps with mom and grandma, coming all the way through the industry to being surrounded by every icon of surf and skate and snow and everything, and what you've done in business and now you're an entrepreneur. Like, dude, it's really an incredible story, especially when I step back and remember seeing Big Tony, the security guy, and thinking he's a security guy. Yeah. I didn't know so much. So Tony, thank you so much for sharing this. It's really rad, and keep doing the rad killer stuff and making a difference for others.
Thanks for having me. And, I appreciate everything. And I love what you're doing and giving folks a chance to learn about, just different things that make up our industries and what we do, I really appreciate that. I would like to say one last thing.
Yeah, of course.
Because we didn't get a chance to touch on it, but really quickly, when you asked, how can they, find out about you, whatever. One of the last things, and I said the pinnacle of my career with Volcom, was that farm to yarn. And if you guys ever get a chance,
say that again,
go look up farm to yarn on YouTube, Volcom farm to yarn. And there's a small video vignette, whatever they call it, that we did towards the end that was produced by Emma Gard and Nate Parasini, as well as some other guys and myself. And that'll give you a good indicator of why I do what I do, because I still look at what I'm doing now. I didn't get a chance to finish that work that we were doing in India. And we created a farmer business school and a women's empowerment program that we're teaching people that were in very extreme rural areas that had no contact really with major cities or anything, and or the resources. And we were giving them tools and other resources that they desperately needed. And when I saw, when you see poverty and you see things like that, and you want to make a difference and you have a chance to, but you're not able to, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's what drives me to be able to make a difference in people. And check that out. That's a cool thing.
Rad.
Yeah. So,
dude,
stoked.
Big Tony Alvarez. Hey,
thank you.
Know your roots.
Always.
Thank
100%.
you, brother. Appreciate it so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me.
So rad.
And
You're
see you in the water.